Hi, this is Dominique from Why Not Workshop, and thank you for joining me today for our punch needle basics video. Today we're going to go through a little bit about punch needles and fabric and yarn combinations that I find useful, and then I'm going to show you how I set up my project when I get started, how to start punch needling, go over some troubleshooting, and then at the end we'll finish off on how to finish off your project or some different ways of doing that. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments below. When we get to demonstrating the punch needle, I'm going to be using the Mina Karin punch today, which is the one that we have available in our beginner kits on Etsy. So to start with, we're just going to talk a little bit about needle types. So we have two main categories of needle. We have these finer needles, which are often adjustable. This one's the Ultra Punch and this one is the Mina Karin. They each come with a set of 3 needles in different sizes to accommodate different sizes of thread and small yarn. And these are great for very detailed projects. And then there are these needles, which are a lot bigger, and these accommodate a thicker yarn and are, I believe, the more traditional needle. Sometimes these are called punch embroidery needles, and these are sometimes adjustable. So this is a Lavore needle, and then sometimes they are a fixed length, and this is an Oxford style needle. So when we're using them, to start with the finer needles, these ones are great for our fine threads. And so I have some examples here. This is a fine weight or a size 1, 100% cotton yarn. And then this here is crochet thread. And then these are embroidery floss, and these can be split down into individual strands, and so you can use 1, 2, 3 or up to 6 strands of this. And which one of these you use depends on what size needle you are using. So the needle sizes come in small, medium and large. I have the large here in my punch needle already, and these ones can be used, the large needles can be used with 6 strands of embroidery floss or some of these small weight yarns. The medium needle can be used with 6 strand of embroidery floss. We're getting a little bit tighter. Can also be used with the embroidery thread, and then fractions of the strands of embroidery floss are good to go through your small needle. As a rule of thumb, if you can put the yarn through it and it moves smoothly, then you're okay to use that. These partner well with a type of fabric called weaver's cloth, and so this is weaver's cloth here. It is a combination of polyester and cotton, and it was designed to go with the Ultra Punch, but the Mina Karin needle also works very well on it. And it works very well with the finer threads, keeping it in place. You can also use some linen and cotton blends as well, and duck cloth. Duck cloth is very good because it doesn't tear. Some of the finer cottons will sometimes tear with the needle going through it, but it is a lot more work on your hand to be able to get the needle to go through that material. Then with the thicker needles here, these can be used with thicker yarns, and so generally worsted weight and upwards, and this is just a worsted weight yarn that I got from Joann's before it closed. But you can use most larger yarns with it. These tend to have a fixed needle size, so this one's a 4.5 Lavore punch. It works really well with this yarn. There is a 5.5 as well that you can use for chunkier yarns. Likewise, this is a fine punch. You can get a standard punch as well that will use a thicker yarn. These are better used with a heavier fabric, and so the most common fabric to use with these seems to be monk's cloth. You can also find it with these lines on it, and it's often commonly referred to as tufting backing because you can use it with a tufting gun as well. And so this is perfect for the larger punches and the larger yarns. Sometimes you can also find this is a primitive linen, and this I can also use with this 4.5, so this one here, 4.5 Lavore, and with the worsted weight yarns, but it's a little bit too tight of a weave to get some of the more bulky yarns through. So now we're going to take a look at the different types of frames we can use. So there's two main frames. You can use a standard embroidery hoop, however you need a lot of tension to be able to get your loops when you're punching to stay in place, and so I don't recommend it because you'll need to constantly change the tension on it because it doesn't tend to grip the fabric very well. So these are the two frame types that I use. This one here is a bit like an embroidery hoop, but it's called a non-slip hoop, sometimes called a Morgan's hoop, and it has this added rim here that when you put your fabric in it, which I'll demonstrate how to do a little bit later on, it grips it in the corresponding groove in the hoop, and that helps to stop it from slipping. And sometimes these will also have a screw hole in the top here to help you really tighten it down. If you're going to do a lot of punch needle, then I really suggest getting one of these. This is a gripper strip frame. These can be a little bit dangerous. These spikes are quite sharp, and so usually you'll use them with a cover. But it's really good at holding your fabric taut, and they come in all different sizes. They give you a really nice big working area so you can work on multiple projects at once. And these are fantastic. All right, and to give you a sort of an idea of what some of these different combinations look like, I have a few examples here. So this one here, as a general rule, the finer the thread, the more detail you're able to get successfully in the project, or at least in my hands, the more detail I'm able to successfully get on smaller areas. So this one here is done with an embroidery thread, and as a comparison, these ones here are done with the size 1 yarn, and they're all done with the Mina Karin punch needle and on weaver's cloth, and so you can see that we just have a bit more thickness and texture when we use the wider yarn than we do the embroidery thread. This one here is also done with the size 2 yarn. This is a larger project, which we'll look at finishing off later, and instead of on weaver's cloth, this one is done on a linen. And then this one here is the acrylic worsted weight yarn that has been done with the Lavore punch. And what's really fun about this is the Lavore punch allows you to get really thick loops, so you can cut the loops and get this fluffy look and then start to shape it into different shapes as well. So it's called carving, and you can get a sort of more of a 3D fluffy appearance to your work. All of them are fun to do. It just depends on what finished effect that you would like. So if you have one of our kits, you are going to have a Mina Karin punch needle set. And like I said, this comes with 3 different size needles, and it does explain on the back here what each size needle is good for. It also comes with 2 threaders in the pack as well. And so here's my one that I already have unpackaged, and then I have a spare threader. So this is an adjustable needle. So when you have it set up, it comes set up already with the large needle in it, and you can adjust the size of how much of it is exposed. So to do that, we're just going to untwist the end of this knob here, and then you can see that I can just push it along to whatever length that I want, and then when it's at the length that I want, I can tighten up the knob. As a general rule, the length of the needle that is exposed, the loop will be roughly half this length. And so I currently have it set at 8, which is what I punch most of my things on, around 7 to 8. You can also change out the needles on this as well. And so to do that, we just take off the back here, loosen up the knob, and pull it out, and then we can interchange them between the needles. Then to put it back in, slide it in. It can be a little bit fiddly sometimes getting that up and over, But once you've got that over, you can just slide it up to where you want it to be. I suggest when you're storing it between use that you pull it all the way back in so you don't accidentally get yourself with the end of it, because these are quite sharp. So I'm going to set it up ready for use. Now, to thread this needle, you'll see that there is a little hole here in the top. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to be using this yarn here. And this is a fine weight or a size 1 cotton yarn. And then I'm going to take this here, move these out of the way so I don't keep catching them. You're going to put the end of your threader through the tip of your needle and bring it out the back. Then you're going to take your yarn, put it through your threader, leave yourself a good tail so it doesn't get lost, and then we're going to pull it through the entire needle until it's coming out the front like this. Now, we need to also get it through this little hole here. So we're now going to put our threader through that little hole, and again put the tail of our yarn through the threader and pull it back through again. And often at this stage I have this very long tail of yarn which I don't particularly want to waste that much. So then I can just pull it back through until I have about 1 inch or 2 hanging out the end here, and that will be used. You do need a little bit here, otherwise when you make your first punch it will just go straight through, but you obviously don't want to waste too much of your yarn, so I just usually use about 1 inch or 2, and that seems to be sufficient. So now we're going to move on to setting up our hoops for our projects. So I will start first with this non-slip hoop and show you how to also trace the pattern onto it, because this is what I'll be demonstrating with today, but I'll also show you how to tension the fabric over the gripper frame as well. So for the non-slip hoop, I'm going to be using weaver's cloth today. So here is a section of weaver's cloth. And so to start with, I just want to get a square of weaver's cloth a little bit wider than what my hoop is, so that when I pull the edges through, I have something to pull on. And so I can lay this down here to kind of get an idea. You can measure this out exactly, but usually I just lay it down and make it approximate. And then you want to take this completely apart, loosen it up, and I'm going to take the small inner hoop and lay it down and lay my fabric over the top of it. And it doesn't matter if it has any wrinkles, you'll see through the tensioning process that these wrinkles will be straightened out. So now with my fabric laying over the top, I'm going to line up my hoop and just push it down. And usually for this, I like my hoop to be just a little bit wider than what my inner hoop is. I don't want it to be too loose, because this helps to pre-tension the fabric a little bit, so you have to do less pulling later on. So once it's in there, just give it a little tug the whole way around to straighten it out. It will probably spring back a little bit at this stage. And then we're going to start tightening. So tighten a little bit. Give it a good tug. And for this, what I'm doing is I'm holding it with my thumb, between my thumb and fingers like this. So I'm getting a nice flat surface, so I'm not just tensioning one area and getting an uneven pull. So I'm trying to get it as even as possible between my thumb and fingers, and I'm going to just give it a nice even tug. And you can see, I don't know if you can see it well on the video, but you can see the weft and weave of the fabric. And at the moment, because I've only tensioned this bottom side, it has a little bit of a sloop downwards like this. But as I tension around, I want to try and make it so that my lines are straight again, so that I know that I've got even tension across my fabric. This takes a little bit of time just going around and stretching. Once you've gone round, tighten it up a little bit more. just going to keep doing this until you get to the point where you're really not getting much more across here. And then at this point, it should be, you can hear that, pretty tight. You want it to sound like a drum. You're going to cinch this down as much as you can. Okay. And now we're ready to go. So I have a pattern here. Somewhere. All right, found it, fallen down the back. So in your kit, you'll have a few patterns to start off with. I just like to print my patterns out once I've designed them, and you can use your computer to design them. You can find different images on Etsy to download, to print out. I like to print them out, and then if I'm going to use the pattern multiple times, then I laminate it. This is the pattern that I use for my coasters here, so I'm going to start setting up for one of these. So what I'm going to do is just turn it over. We're going to put it on the back here. I'm going to take some tape to hold it in place. It doesn't particularly matter if it's straight if you're not going to be keeping it in the frame. And then this is a friction heat erasable pen that's really easy to write on fabric with. But since you can pick which side of the project you want to be the front, and whether you want the sort of 3D loop side to be the front or the smoother back side, and you'll see what I mean when we start punching. But since I know that I'm going to be using the 3D loop side to be the front of my project, and that's going to actually end up on this side, I could use a more permanent marker if I wanted to too, but I quite like using the erasable ones just in case. I don't want anything to show through. So I'm just going to go around and trace this. And if you're having trouble seeing the pattern through the fabric, I usually find the weaver's cloth is pretty good at being able to be see-through enough, but you can also hold it up to a window or put a phone underneath it or a bright screen, and that will help you to be able to transfer the pattern to the fabric. Once I've got that on there, I can now take this off the back. It's ready to use again. All right, and then we're ready to punch. Now, just quickly, before we start punching that, I'm just going to show you how to set up if you were to use one of these gripper frames. It's very similar. So for this one, the next project I want to do on this, I'm actually going to be using the larger needle. So I'm going to be using this linen on it. And again, you can lay it over and cut off the amount you need. So to lay my fabric down here. You want to give yourself a bit of a border around it. So I'm going to line my fabric up like this. Now, for this one, I'll lay this over the top like this and give it a little bit of a tug on each side. Now, you do want to be really careful because these frames will definitely scratch you if you get too close to them. So you just want to be careful about, you can sort of push down over the top, but if you brush against them, they will give you a bit of a scratch. So once you've got that lined up where you want it to be, it's exactly the same as the other frame. We're just going to go around and I'm just going to pull it off and tighten and pull back down again. And again, I'm just trying to use a flat grip on it and try and get it nice and even. And these are usually a little bit easier for me to be able to see where the lines on my fabric are. And then particularly if you're using the monk's cloth that has these orange lines already on it, that makes it a lot easier to be able to get your fabric straight. So you just want to keep going around in the circle a few times until you have all of this tensioned. And then once you've got it tight enough, not quite there yet, you should get that nice drum sound. That's pretty good, and so that will be good enough. Now you can see that these gripper strips do come through the fabric a little bit. You can punch on it like this, but you tend to hurt the palm of your hand a little bit. And so if you're going to get one of these frames, I highly recommend also getting a cover, and there's many different patterns of covers available. And so for this, I just slip my cover on. And now my hands are going to be protected. And again, you can do the same thing with this, where you turn it over, stick whatever you want on the back side here so that you can see it, hold it up to the light and be able to trace through it. All right, so now I have my pattern transferred on to my fabric. My fabric is nice and taut in the hoop, and so I am ready to start punching. So I'm going to quickly go over again how to thread your punch needle, and I'm going to be filling in this flower. I'm going to start in the center and work my way out. There's no real right or wrong that I at least know of for which order to do things. I tend to like to work the smaller pieces first and then go on to the larger parts. I just find it easier to get crisper details that way, but you can find a way that works comfortably for you. In general, I go around the outside first and then circle my way into the center. So to thread my needle here, I'm just going to place my threader through the tip of the needle till it comes out the back. Place my yarn through, pull it out the end, and thread my threader through the eye of the needle, yarn through that again, pull it out the back. I'm just going to shorten this down so that I have just a short tail here coming out the side. And then when I punch needle, what I want to do is I hold this roughly like a pencil, and we've got this open bevel here, and we need to travel in the direction of this bevel so that our loops don't pull out. It's also really important that the thread or yarn that you're using is nice and loose. Any tension on this and it will also pull your loops out. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to line it up with my outline here, and I'm going to push my needle all the way through so that it comes down to the base of the needle that's exposed. And I should have told you I am on length number 8 for this demonstration. And so you can see here that the needles come all the way through the fabric. Then I'm going to pull it back slowly so that I don't come too fast out of the fabric. And I only just want the tip out, and I almost drag my tip across the fabric and then punch it back in again just a few millimeters away. And so you're just going to continue this motion out, drag it a couple of millimeters and back in. What you don't want to do is pull your needle up, because you'll see that my loop starts to disappear. You want to try and aim for even size loops. If you do something like that, you're able to just pull it up, shorten yourself back down again, give a little bit of a scratch so that it goes away, and continue on. And so I'm just going to go all the way around the outside here of the center of my flower. And you see that I am turning my punch needle. You can either turn your entire work or you can turn the punch needle in your hand so that you always have the bevel going forwards. Making sure to get nice even stitches that when you push the needle in, you're going all the way the length of the needle. So when I get back to where I've started, just again making sure that I've still got some nice loose yarn out here, I am going to now move to the inside of this. I'm going to start circling inwards, and I try to roughly aim to put my needle in between the previous stitches. And that just helps to make it more filled in and less like all of your loops are just lined up in lines on the other side. I just prefer that a little bit more. And for this project, I'm going to be using the loop side as my front of the project. So this side's going to be the front side. You can use this back side here too, or the flat side of your project as your front, and vary the length of your stitches to make different effects. That can look quite cool. You can also mix it up. So I could do the center of the flower this way, where I'm going to have it flat, and then to make the petals, I could turn it over and punch from the other side so that I have 3D petals, and you can mix it up and have some fun with it. So I'm just going to continue punching around the edge here, making sure that I'm not pulling out too far. I'm just putting each row right next to the previous one and just going round and around in a circle. And so I will speed this up so that you guys don't have to keep watching this entire way around. And then when I get to the end, I will show you how to end the color that you're on. Alright, so now I am coming up to the end here, and so I'm just filling in my last couple of stitches. And so when I've placed my last one, what I'm going to do is my bevel is facing this way, the hole is facing out the back here. I'm just going to pull it out, and I'm going to get my thumb ready here so that I can pinch it the second it comes out of the fabric. So I'm just pinching down that so that I'm not pulling my loop through, and then I can pull out a little length of my yarn, and then I just snip it. I leave a couple of millimeters here. At the end, once we've finished all of the punching, I'm going to cover the back of the project with some glue, and that just helps to secure your loops. All right, and so this is what the front looks like so far, the center of my flower. And so I am going to continue to work on my other colors around here, and then we will meet back together at the end and I will show you how to finish off your project. So I'm coming to the end of punching here, and just before I finish out this last little bit, I thought that I would just go over a few tips that I've learned along the way on my punch needle journey to try and make things a little bit neater. So first of all, if you do make a mistake, you are able to pull it out. So if you do, just you can pull your thread back like this, and you can see here that I have a hole that's opened up here in the fabric. If you've got a good quality fabric, you should be able to just scratch it with your finger and that hole fills back in again. And then you can slide your needle back down so that it is right next to your fabric again, and you're ready to go. You can continue punching. To try and get neat edges, I've found it helpful when I am going to the next color to leave just a little bit more of a gap between the two colors than I do when I'm punching the individual rows of each color. So usually I'll try and punch those really close together so that I don't have any see-through areas. But if you are traveling between colors, I'll show you on the other side because I'm sure I still have a few. You can sometimes have it where your punch needle goes through the color next door and you don't have a nice crisp line. So I've just finished my last spot in there. So I'm going to push my thumb down on the fabric to hold my thread in place as I pull it out. And then I am able to trim off the edge here. Where my little scissors have gone, so I will use these. There we go. All right, and so here is my finished project. And so you can see here, this pink to yellow transition's pretty good. I think I probably did a bit better at leaving a nice gap there. But you can see sometimes my yellow and blue are intermingling a little bit. So what I usually do at this stage, you can use a variety of things. You can use the tip of your scissors. I often find the needle of the punch is quite good for this. You could also use a sewing needle. But I just go around the edges and I just push my threads to where I want them to be. And this separates them out, and so I can get a bit of a crisper edge. And I tend to find, I like to do this before gluing the back of it because it's got a little bit more flexibility, but you've just got to be really gentle. If you are concerned about pulling your loops out, then I would glue the back first just so they're a bit more secure. And you go around, you can just fix up any mistakes that you have. I'm trying to see here, I might not have any that have gone through. I'm just tucking everything to the right side of where it should be. That also helps to get the shape that you want to all of your parts of your picture. Okay. Do the same here. This one actually looks pretty good. It doesn't look like I have punched through any loops on the side here. Let me see, I probably have one of these somewhere. So here are some that I have done earlier that I'm going to make into little magnets, and you can see here that these colors, when I've got these fine details, the colors all get mixed up. And so you can use your punch needle to sort around them. And you can see this one here, my light color has gone through my dark color. And so sometimes you just need to tease, and often I find folding the project in half. So this is where it's helpful to have already glued the back. And you can see that camera there, that there's just this little fine bit of cotton that's hanging onto this one. So I just try and tease them off and get them round to the right side. And this is certainly happens more when you have small details, and can be avoided a little bit two ways: by making sure that you've got a wide enough area between your two colors. And then you can also, so you just pull it out like that and start to push them back over to where they should be. You can also look at the back side of your work or the front side, look at where the loops are as you're punching around some of these areas to make sure that the loops are moving out of the way. That is much easier to do if you are working with a hoop than with the frame, but you can also turn the frame over to do it as well. It just takes a little bit of coordination, not looking to see where your needle is. So just go around your project, either before or after you glue it, depending on your preference, and you can see now that that area is separated out so we can see the detail a little bit better. So now, also trim this other piece here that I have. So I am ready to glue this. And so you can use most glues on this. I tend to like to use Mod Podge, but you can also use a tacky glue. I have seen people use carpet backing or carpet sealant, I guess it is. It does smell a little bit if you're going to use that, but it can be useful for larger projects if you're making rugs, things like that. So this is all stuck to the top here. Right, and then I just have an old paintbrush that I use to do this with. Make sure you wash it pretty quickly afterwards, otherwise it sticks there. And then I just put a nice layer of glue right over the top. And I try not to get it really on my fabric. I just try and get it to the edges of where I've punched, because I tend to find if it goes on the fabric, it gets a little bit crinkly and hard, and then it makes the next step a little more difficult. Let's finish that off there. Right. So you don't need a super thick layer, but you do want a nice covering over everything so that it will all stay in place. All right, well, I'm going to let that dry for half an hour. Just a couple of other things that I wanted to mention. The first is I like to put my pattern on the fabric once everything's been tensioned. Sometimes I find that if I have put it on beforehand and then I tension it, I'll distort the pattern and the fabric. And likewise at this end, I also like to glue my back before I take it off the tension, and that just helps, I've found, to keep everything in the same shape, particularly when you're doing something like this where it's a coaster and you want it to stay the same shape. Maybe less important if you're going to eventually put it in a frame, or it's a little bit more freestyle in terms of how it looks shape-wise. Yes, so I'm going to clean my brush and meet back in half an hour, and we will cut this pattern out and glue it to its backing. All right, for the last part of this video, I'm going to show you how I finish off a few different projects here. I've moved downstairs so that I have access to my hot glue gun. It makes a little bit of a mess. And we're going to look at finishing off in a frame. Finishing these ones off that I'm going to back with a magnet as magnets. And then finishing this one off here where I'm going to back it onto a coaster backing to use as a coaster. So we'll start with this one. So I'm going to take it out of its frame. The Mod Podge on the back is now dry, so I can take it out. And I'm just going to take my scissors and cut around the edge. And I'm going to leave roughly 1/2 inch. These are not good scissors. Let's see if I can find some better ones here. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's all going to be hidden on the back. And then I'm going to take a pair of, I like to use my fine scissors for this. These are actually my embroidery scissors. But you can use any scissors that are nice and sharp at the tip. As you could tell, my first pair was not. And I'm just going to cut, and you're going to be careful because you don't want to cut all the way up to your where you've started your punching, but you want to get quite close so that when this folds, it's going to not show, but obviously you don't want to unravel your work either. So I'm just going to make these little snips all the way around the side. And now this one's going to be a little bit different because I'm backing it onto the coaster. I'm not going to put felt on it, but the other ones we're going to put felt backing on them. So once I've got all of this set, I'm going to grab my hot glue gun here. And this part you need to be careful. It does get uncomfortable sometimes. And so I'm just putting a little bead of glue and pushing this up and over. And you want to be really careful not to touch the glue as you're doing it. You can use other types of glue as well. You don't have to use a hot glue gun. I just find this works really well because it grabs it quite fast. You can wear some finger protection while you're doing this, like some rubber gloves, just to try and prevent the hot glue from getting on you. So I'm just going around. You need to fold it over so that it's right on the edge, but avoid the temptation to pull it too much. You'll curve your project under, but it will also split the fibers apart on your upside, and you'll start to see the backing fabric underneath. And so I try to avoid doing that. So I just want to fold it over. Because this is going on the coaster backing and the coaster has a little bit of a dip to it, it's a bit easier to hide the backing fabric, which is a big bonus. You'll find that you'll see when we do the felt ones that it can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So just give this a little push down. And then I'm going to quickly grab another glue stick. And so this is my prepared coaster base. I just get these from Michael's, and then my husband very kindly stains them for me. And what I'm going to do, this is going to eventually sit in here like this. It's just the right size to sit in there. And so I'm going to put a bead of glue all the way around the edge. You got to work quickly so that your glue doesn't cool down. Sometimes I find pushing from the back, particularly on this little glue gun, helps. And hefty amount of glue over the top. And then for this one, you very carefully have to drop it in to get it centered and give it a good push down. And so that's that one. That one's a little bit easier to hide your sides on. It's very forgiving. And then I just put a little cork base on it to go on the table. All right, so these ones I've already turned in all of the sides, and so these ones can go straight onto felt. And so for this one, I'm actually going to use a white felt so that it blends in a little bit with the white backing, and then that will have a magnet put on the back of it. So again, I'm just going to put some glue around the edge. And then put it face down. Glue side down. You have to work fairly quickly so that your glue doesn't dry on you when you do these. Again, I've also done this with tacky glue and fabric glue. They just take a little bit longer, and honestly, I'm not that patient. Stuck. Stuck. There we go. Right. So now for these. Back on there. Going to take my pair of scissors. Actually, first, before I take my scissors, you can see here that I haven't got very close to the edge. And so I can take my glue. This is actually easier if you cut them out a little bit. I'm just going to cut these into rough squares. We'll neaten them up here in a minute. So what I'm going to carefully do is peel back the backing here where I've got my edges, and I'm going to put, just working in sections, a bead of glue pretty close to the edge, then push down my felt there. And just work along the edge of it. You want to be careful, you need to strike a balance between not getting it on your actual yarn, but getting it pretty close to the edge, and this is how it wraps up so that you don't see so much of your backing material. Just give it a good push. And then I can take my pair of sharp scissors. And I'm just going to cut nice and close to the edge, just making sure that you're not cutting your loops. Okay. And so it's just back there on the back, and then I'll cut out a magnet and stick that over there. You can also back it with other things. This one I backed with some fabric instead. But the felt often works quite nicely on the back of these. So the last way that you can back these is if you're putting them in a frame. So this one I have placed into my frame and stretched it out. And then I'm actually going to pre-draw on this one the frame size so that I can cut out the right piece of fabric. So I have this frame that is the same size here. I'm going to take that out, place it over my backing fabric. And I'm just going to trace around the outside of it. And cut it out. All right. And I'm going to take my material here. I'm going to cut around it and leave a decent sized border. And then I have this needle that is loaded up with some embroidery thread. You can also just use a normal needle and thread. This is the darning needle. I just find that the thicker thread works a little bit easier for me. But if you don't have that, you just use a normal needle, sewing needle and thread. And then I'm going to take these big bites all the way around the outside of this. And I'm not going to pull it through right yet because I'm going to cinch it at the end. So I haven't actually tied a knot in this. I'm going to pull it through a bit so that I can get all the way around the outside. Right. So I have my two ends here, and my fabric is now got this running stitch the whole way around. So I'm just going to pull my ends in, and it cinches down my fabric. Cut these a little bit shorter so they're easier to tie. I'm just going to tie a knot in it. Broke there. That's okay. Just tie that around there. All right, so that's secured it there on the back. And now I'm just going to cover all of that up with my backing fabric. So I just work in sections, put a little bit of glue on the side, and then I'm going to line it up over the other side. And next quarter. And next quarter. And then it's just a matter of filling in the centre bits. I like to try and stretch the felt out a little bit, just to make it a little bit more taut over the back. And then this is what you end up with as a finished product, ready to hang on the wall. All right, so I hope you found this helpful as a beginner. If you have any other tips for other beginners starting out on their punch needle journey, please put a comment below to pass that on to others. And if you found this helpful, please give us a like and a share. I have got some links below that link to some of the products that I've used here. As full disclaimer, some of these are for sale on our Etsy shop and others do contain affiliate links. I don't recommend anything unless I personally use it and like it. And thank you for joining us today. Happy crafting.